The contract the universe signed in silence sometimes. Destiny whispers promises that life insists on forgetting. But destiny, it never forgets. When two souls are stitched together in childhood by an old agreement by ink on fragile paper, sealed with innocent dreams, separation may hurt, but it is never final. If you believe that some love stories are written in the stars, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring you more heartwarming romances. Like this one, Clara Almeda believed in structure. She believed in law, in order, in logic. As one of the most respected attorneys in São Paulo's legal world, her life was ruled by contracts, deadlines, and responsibility. She was the woman who always had everything under control, or at least, that's what everyone thought. But there was something she could never quite control, an ache, deep in her chest, a longing without a name, a quiet shadow that followed her even in her proudest moments, as if a chapter of her life had been torn out before she could ever read it. Now, standing at the altar, dressed in delicate white lace, Clara felt it again. Her fiancé stood beside her. He was kind, stable, and exactly the kind of man she was expected to marry. The ceremony was flawless, the music soft, the air filled with roses and champagne dreams. But as the officiant began to speak, Clara's mind wandered. A name whispered in her soul, Leonardo. The name meant nothing, and yet, everything. What no one knew, not even Clara herself, was that once, many years ago, two mothers had signed a promise, a betrothal. Clara and Leonardo were to be married. But before the promise could be fulfilled, the boy vanished. No explanation, no goodbye, only silence. Elsewhere, Leonardo Villela adjusted the cufflinks of his navy blue suit, gazing out from the 47th floor of his skyscraper. The view stretched across the skyline, a kingdom built by his own hands. At just 33, he was one of Brazil's youngest tech moguls. Cold, efficient, elusive. His name opened doors, but no one truly knew the man behind it. He hadn't used his birth name in years. Leonardo Martins no longer existed. That boy was buried the day he fled his past, escaping the chains of an arranged future he never agreed to. But the past has its own voice. Earlier that morning, Leonardo received a letter. A woman threatened to sue him over a broken engagement contract. At first he scoffed, another gold digger trying her luck. But when he saw the name Clara Almeida, he froze. Clara. Memories, long buried, surged like a flood. Her smile, her voice, the time they spent as children, and the weight of the promise he had broken. The promise his mother never forgot. The legal team recommended meeting with the attorney assigned to his case. He agreed, reluctantly, deciding he'd end the matter quickly and quietly. When Clara walked into the glass-walled boardroom of Villela Tech, she did not expect to find a man with eyes like thunderclouds and posture carved from stone. He radiated power and elegance, the kind that didn't need to shout. Leonardo, however, felt everything crash inside him the moment he saw her. She hadn't changed, not truly. There was fire in her presence, poise in her stance, and an echo of the little girl he once knew. But Clara looked at him with nothing but professional neutrality. She didn't recognize him. Still, her heart beat stuttered. That was there, buried beneath years of ambition and grief, a strange familiarity. A pulse, almost painful, that warned her this man wasn't just another client. Fate had taken its first step, and as they exchanged polite, distant words across a cold marble table, the universe smiled, because it knew the storm that was coming. Neither Clara nor Leonardo had any idea that this was only the beginning, that secrets would unravel, that false identities would fall, that a love, long dormant, would fight its way back to life. And, this time, it would not be denied. Asterisk, a past that refuses to stay bare. The meeting should have been simple, professional, a straightforward legal consultation between a CEO and a top-tier attorney. But nothing about destiny is ever simple. Clara sat across from Leonardo in the glass-paneled conference room, her pen poised above a legal pad. Her voice, calm and assured, outlined the terms of the decades-old engagement contract she had been asked to analyze. She spoke with confidence, unaware of the tremor her presence caused in the man sitting opposite her. Leonardo, on the other hand, couldn't stop watching her. Every detail struck him with quiet force, the curve of her mouth, the way her brows knit in concentration, even the ring on her left hand she hadn't yet removed. She was engaged. Of course she was. Life had moved on. People changed. Promises faded. And yet, here she was, as if fate had frozen time just long enough to give them a second chance. "I'm sorry," Clara said after a pause, flipping through a folder. "You said your mother's name was Helena Martins." Leonardo nodded slowly. His throat was dry. "Yes, that's correct." For the first time, Clara looked up and studied him, really studied him. There was something in that name, a flicker in her memory. But no, it couldn't be. She dismissed the thought and returned to her notes. The contract, if valid, could technically be enforced, though proving intent behind a childhood arrangement is legally questionable. "I'm not interested in enforcement," he replied. "I just want to know if I'm at risk of being dragged into a public scandal." Clara nodded, her voice clipped. I understand. It's best we address it quietly, before the press hears anything. Neither spoke of the obvious tension in the room, the strange gravity pulling their souls toward each other like magnets with forgotten history. Across town, a different storm was brewing. In a luxury penthouse lined with silk curtains and fresh orchids, Isadora Resende scrolled through photos on her tablet. Most were of Leonardo captured at events, in boardrooms, on private jets. A predatory smile curled on her lips. He doesn't even remember me, she muttered, tossing the device aside. But he will. Isadora had reinvented herself too, many times to count. And now, with a forged connection to Leonardo's past, she planned her next move. A scandal? A payoff? Maybe even a place at his side by force, if necessary. She had a story to sell, and a price tag to match, and she wasn't the only one with a plan. At that same moment, Victor Martins Leonardo's estranged cousin leaned back in his chair, flipping a pen between his fingers. He had heard whispers about the engagement contract, about Clara, about the woman Leonardo had once been promised to. Victor smiled, cruel and calculated. So the little lawyer is back in the picture, he murmured. He remembered Clara from long ago, soft-spoken, honest, naive, easy to manipulate. That innocence would be her downfall. Back in the boardroom, Clara stood to gather her files. I'll have a formal analysis for you within the week, she said. If you prefer to settle the matter quietly, we can propose a retroactive cancellation of the contract to protect all parties involved. Leonardo rose too, taller than she remembered, no, taller than she imagined. Her heels gave her poise, but his presence made the air feel thinner. Thank you, Dr. Almeida, he said with a nod. The formal tone felt wrong. Cold. But what else could he say? That he had dreamed of her face more nights than he cared to admit? That he had run away from her once and regretted it every day since? He watched her walk out of the room, her perfume lingering behind like a forgotten melody. Not alone again? Leonardo exhaled and let his mask slip. Just for a second, a crack, a shadow, a flicker of the boy he once was, and in Clara's chest. As she exited the elevator, her heart whispered again, Leonardo, but no, this couldn't be the same boy. He had vanished, left her with unanswered questions and a hollow promise. That chapter was closed, wasn't it? Wasn't it? The weight of unspoken truths. The city moved fast, outside cars honking, people rushing, buildings swallowing the sky, but inside her office, Clara sat in complete stillness. Her hands rested over a closed folder, the one marked with Leonardo Villela's name. Though her thoughts were far from the paperwork, she couldn't shake it. There was something in his voice, something in the way he looked at her, not just familiarity, it was deeper, a kind of ache mirrored in his eyes, like he was remembering something she had forgotten. And that name? Helena Martins. Clara had heard that name before, many years ago, a woman with eyes of steel and a voice that commanded silence. A name once whispered in the halls of her childhood home, back when her own mother was alive. But memory has a cruel way of blurring the lines between real and imagined. She reached for her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Her thumb hovered over a name, Helena. She hadn't spoken to the woman in over a decade. Helena had vanished from her life after her mother died, after the contract was supposedly forgotten, or broken, or something worse. Clara sighed and set the phone down. No, it couldn't be the same Leonardo. The odds were impossible. But fate doesn't play by odds. That evening, Leonardo stood in front of a private bar tucked inside his penthouse suite. The city glowed beneath him, but his eyes were fixed on a small black and white photo, two teenagers standing side by side. Awkward smiles, sunlight hitting their faces like a blessing. Clara had always hated posing for photos. He remembered the way she used to roll her eyes, the way she'd pretend to be annoyed but secretly loved the attention. She had been fire and caution at once, so different from the world of corporate masks he now lived in. And now, she was back, right in front of him. Brilliant, poised, unknowingly holding the key to the one promise he had never truly broken. Sipped the scotch in his glass, but it did little to dull the storm inside him. His assistant's voice echoed from the intercom. Sir, Ms. Resende is here to see you. Leonardo's jaw tightened. Isadora. He had met her briefly at a gala months ago. She was charming, calculating, and unnervingly well-informed about his personal life. At the time, he hadn't thought much of her. Now, she was showing up uninvited. She entered the room like she owned its heels, clicking. Red lips curved into something between a smile and a threat. Leonardo, she purred, her voice smooth as velvet. We have some unfinished business. He remained still. You weren't invited. She laughed softly, walking straight to the bar and pouring herself a drink without asking. When has that ever stopped me? What do you want? She raised a brow. A conversation, and a little compensation for my silence. He didn't respond, just watched her, calculating, cold. You see, she continued, sipping her drink. I have proof. Emails, photos, your mother's signature on a certain contract, the one linking you to a charming young woman named Clara Almeida. He felt the name hit him like a punch. I don't think Clara would appreciate knowing the truth, do you? Isadora added, eyes glinting with wicked satisfaction. Voice came out low, controlled, dangerous. You're bluffing? Try me. She leaned in closer. $10 million. Or I make the story public. Or better yet, I walk into Clara's firm and announce myself as your rightful fiancé. According to the contract, I was chosen, wasn't I? You weren't, he growled. You're not even mentioned. No, she admitted with a shrug, but Clara doesn't know that. Not yet. Leonardo clenched his jaw. His empire was built on silence, discretion, perfection. A scandal now could unravel everything, especially with Victor waiting like a vulture to take his place. I'll think about it, he said quietly. She smirked. You do that? When she left, Leonardo didn't move for a long time. The room was still, the city lights blinking like warnings outside the window. He turned back to the old photo on his desk. Clara's face, that smile. He had run from her once, he wouldn't do it again. But telling her the truth, that was another battle entirely. Asterisk, the echo of a forgotten promise. Clara couldn't sleep. The city was quiet outside her apartment window, but inside her chest, a storm raged. No matter how many times she told herself that the man she had met was just a client, her thoughts betrayed her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Leonardo's face, his eyes too familiar, his voice.com, his presence too intense. She didn't want to admit it, but something inside her stirred. Something she had buried years ago. She pulled out an old wooden box from her closet, blowing off a thin layer of dust. Inside were faded photographs, dried letters, childhood sketches, remnants of a life that felt like a dream. Her fingers stopped. On a wrinkled piece of paper, a letter from her mother, one she had read so many times, the words were nearly etched into her soul. Clara, minha filha, dia você vai entender que o amor nem sempre faz sentido. Mas quando ele for verdadeiro, você vai sentir, mesmo que o tempo tente apagar. Even across years, the words wrapped around her like a soft whisper, and they hurt. She thought of the boy her mother once spoke about, the one she had been promised to, the one who never came. Could it really be Leonardo? No, that was impossible. She pushed the box aside, frustrated at herself for even considering it. She was a woman of facts, not fantasy. But her heart disagreed. Next morning, Clara arrived at her firm early. She needed distraction, logic, legal arguments, deadlines, something solid to hold on to. What she didn't expect was to find Victor Martins waiting in the reception area. He stood confidently in a dark green suit, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a single white rose. Clara Almeida, he greeted with a charming grin. Even more beautiful than I remember. She raised a brow. Do I know you? He laughed, casually stepping closer. Not yet, but we have something in common. Leonardo Vilela. Her heart skipped. Victor extended the rose toward her. I'm his cousin. We grew up together. Before he changed his name, before he became this untouchable tech god. Clara didn't move to take the flower. And what exactly brings you here? A concern, he said, lowering his voice. About Leonardo? And about you. She crossed her arms. What concern? Victor glanced around, then leaned in slightly. Can we talk? Somewhere private. Against her better judgment, Clara led him to a small meeting room. She didn't trust his smile, but curiosity outweighed caution. Once inside, Victor dropped the charm. You're being dragged into something dangerous, he said. Leonardo doesn't tell the truth. Ever. He disappears, changes his identity, hides behind companies and lawyers. You think you're just handling a contract? Trust me, it's more than that. Clara narrowed her eyes. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm saying he's manipulating you. He always gets what he wants. And if you're not careful, you'll be left with broken pieces again. Again? She asked sharply, but Victor smiled slyly. He didn't tell you, did he, that he left you once before? The room spun slightly. She stepped back. Victor continued. I remember when you two were just kids. He vanished. No explanation. Left you and your mother with nothing. My Aunt Helena tried to fix things, but Leonardo refused to come back. Said he didn't want to be controlled. Clara's voice dropped. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want to see you hurt, and because unlike him, I don't hide who I am. He stepped closer, too close. If you ever want the truth, come to me. I'll show you what kind of man he really is. Clara stared at him, conflicted. Every word from Victor felt carefully placed like bait. And yet, something about it unsettled her. She didn't respond, just walked out of the room and left him standing there as she returned to her desk. Her phone buzzed. Message from Helena Martins. We need to talk. Urgently. Clara stared at the screen. The past wasn't just knocking, it was breaking down the door. Breaking down the door. The woman who knew everything. Clara didn't usually tremble. As a lawyer, she had learned to stay composed even in the most intense situations. Courtrooms, negotiations, million-dollar settlements. But that morning, as she waited for Helena Martins in a discreet cafe downtown, her fingers gripped the porcelain coffee cup tighter than necessary. The name Helena carried a weight she couldn't fully explain. It lingered like a scent from childhood, a voice in the dark, a shadow, from a time she had carefully buried. Now, it was back sharp, sudden, and impossible to ignore. When Helena arrived, time seemed to pull back its curtains. Elegant, poised, with silver hair tucked into a clean bun, and eyes that pierced through stone. Helena sat across from Clara without pleasantries. There were no hugs, no polite smiles, only silence and tension thick enough to shatter. "You've grown," Helena said softly, her voice a mixture of admiration and regret. "The last time I saw you, you were afraid to sleep alone." Clara swallowed hard. "Why did you call me after all these years?" Helena slid a brown folder across the table. "Because it's time you knew the truth." Inside were photocopies of the engagement contract. Clara had already seen it was working on the case. In fact, but something about seeing it here, in Helena's hands, made it feel heavier, more real, more personal. "This contract wasn't just symbolic," Helena said. "It was a pact between families. Your father trusted me, your mother did too. They believed that, in time, the two of you would understand." Clara's voice was low, but he disappeared. "You know that?" Leonardo left. Helena nodded. Slowly. "He did, and for a long time, I blamed him, but there were reasons." "What reasons?" Clara pressed. Helena hesitated for the first time. "Leonardo found out things about his father. Corruption, blackmail, threats. He thought he was being used as a pawn in a business alliance. So he ran. Changed his name? Cut ties with everyone." Clara blinked, stunned. "It explained the vanishing act, but it didn't ease the ache left behind. And you let me grow up thinking he abandoned me." Helena's eyes softened. "It was the only way to protect him, man, to let you build a life without waiting for a ghost." Clara looked down at the contract again. The names, the signatures, the date, it was all there. She could no longer deny it. "So it's him?" she whispered. "Leonardo Villela is Leonardo Martins." "Yes," Helena said gently. "And he never stopped loving you, even when he tried to forget." Clara's breath caught. The look in his eyes during that meeting, the unspoken weight. Between them, it hadn't been her imagination. It had been history, reborn. But before she could respond, her phone buzzed. Message from office client Victor Martins requested an urgent meeting today. Clara looked up sharply. "Do you know Victor?" Helena's expression darkened. "Better than I wish I did. He's always envied Leonardo, wanted what wasn't his. Power, legacy, even you." Clara's heart dropped. "He came to see me. Told me Leonardo's lying, that I should trust him instead." Helena's tone turned firm. "Don't make that mistake. It wasn't just a warning. It was a plea. Victor wasn't harmless. And now he was circling." Clara stood, her mind spinning with truths she hadn't asked for. Everything she thought she knew had shifted. She had questions too many. Did Leonardo still love her? Why didn't he tell her the truth? And where did Isadora fit in this tangled web? As she stepped out of the cafe, the sky had turned gray. A distant rumble of thunder echoed above the city, as if even nature knew the winds were changing. She didn't know what came next. She wasn't sure who to trust. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. Asterisk, dangerous games, and hidden hearts. Victor Martins paced across his luxurious apartment, the floor-to-ceiling windows casting distorted reflections of a man who had grown used to getting what he wanted by charm, by force, or by sabotage. Clara's eyes still haunted him, not just because she was beautiful or intelligent, but because she reminded him of everything that should have been his. The Martins legacy, the family name, the empire. But instead, everything went to Leonardo. Victor clutched a glass of whiskey, fingers tense. His plan was working. Clara was beginning to question things. He could see it in her eyes, the flicker of doubt, the weight of betrayal beginning to form. It wouldn't take much to tip the balance. Across the city, Clara sat at her desk, staring at an email she hadn't yet opened. The subject line read, "Confidential. About Leonardo Villela, sent anonymously." Her cursor hovered over it. Hesitant. She had already learned more than she bargained for, and now, every new piece of information felt like walking through a minefield. Still, she clicked. Inside was a series of attachments, copies of property records, hidden investments, internal memos, documents that painted Leonardo not as a man running from his past, but as someone carefully erasing it. Her breath hitched. She knew about his name change, about the family secrets. But this made it look deliberate, calculated. Beneath the attachments was a message. "The man you're protecting is not the man you think he is. He doesn't want justice, he wants silence. Be careful who you trust." Clara leaned back in her chair. Her heart didn't want to believe it, but her mind was trained to question everything. That evening, she walked through the quiet marble halls of her building and stood in front of the elevator mirror, adjusting her coat. Her reflection looked tired, strong, but cracked. Her thoughts spun in circles, and her instincts shouted two truths at once. He's lying. He's telling the truth. She didn't know which voice to follow. Meanwhile, Leonardo sat alone in his penthouse. His phone screen lit up with a message draft he'd written but never sent. "Clara, there's something I need to tell you. Not as a CEO, not as a client, but as the boy you once knew." He deleted it again. He couldn't risk losing her. Not now. Not when the past had finally forced its way back into the present. The doorbell rang. It was Issa.org. She walked in as if she lived there, dressed in silk and false confidence. Her lipstick was perfect. Her smile, dangerous. "We need to talk," she said, placing a folder on his table. Leonardo didn't move. "What now?" She opened the folder, revealing photos of him and Clara, some from outside her office, others from security footage in the building. "You're being watched," she whispered, "and I'm the only one who can help you." He stared at the images, rage simmering just beneath his skin. "You've gone too far. I've only just begun," she said sweetly. "But if you want me to stop, you know what I want?" Leonardo's voice dropped. "Money," she laughed. "Money is just a starting point. I want a title, a seat, a future. You want to be my wife? I want to be part of your story," she replied, stepping closer. "You were promised to someone once. I can be her replacement. A better version. Smarter, more loyal." Leonardo's eyes narrowed. "You're insane." She shrugged, unfazed. "Or maybe just ambitious." He slammed the folder shut. "Get out." But Isadora didn't move. "Do you think Clara will still look at you the same when she finds out the truth? About your father? About what you've done to cover up your past? About the people you've paid off?" Leonardo clenched his fists. "You don't know anything. I know enough," she said. "And so does Victor." Leonardo's blood went cold. Victor. He had underestimated him. Again, after Isadora left, Leonardo made a call, one he had avoided for too long. "Helena, it's me. I need you to talk to Clara. She has to hear the truth from you, not from them." Helena's voice was steady on the other end. "I've already told her everything." Leonardo's eyes widened. "Then why hasn't she called me?" "Because sometimes," Helena said, "when the heart breaks, it needs silence before it can forgive." He sat down slowly, his heart pounding with a fear he hadn't felt in years. He was losing her. And this time, it wouldn't be because he ran. It would be because he waited too long to fight. Too long to fight. A truth too heavy to hide. Clara stood outside the glass doors of Valela Tech, her hands clenched into fists inside the pockets of her coat. The night air was heavy with tension, the kind that pressed down on her shoulders like a warning. She had told herself she wouldn't come, that she was done searching for answers he refused to give. But she couldn't stay away. The folder Helena had given her, the anonymous email, the whispers from Victor, all of it formed a storm too loud to ignore. Tonight, she would face him. The receptionist didn't dare stop her. She walked past security, through sleek marble halls and mirrored elevators, until she reached the top floor, his sanctuary. Leonardo was seated behind his desk, the skyline flickering behind him. He didn't look surprised to see her. He stood slowly. "Clara, I don't want excuses," she said, her voice cold but trembling. "I want the truth, all of it." He nodded once, silently, then gestured to the seat across from him. She didn't take it. "I know who you are," she said, "or at least, who you were. Leonardo Martins. The boy I was promised it, the boy who disappeared." His eyes flickered, and now her voice cracked. "Now I don't know who I'm talking to." There was silence between them, the kind that speaks louder. Then shouting, he stepped around the desk, slowly, like approaching a frightened animal. "I didn't leave because of you. I know that now, but you didn't come back either. You let me believe I wasn't enough to fight for." He lowered his head. "I was 17, angry, lost. My father was blackmailing entire families. My mother tried to clean it up, but I couldn't trust anyone. I changed my name, built a new life. I thought I could outrun the past." "You didn't outrun it," she said, stepping closer. "You let it rot and hoped no one would notice." Leonardo looked up, his voice raw. "And now you do. You see everything." "Yes. And I don't know if I hate you for it, or if I just hate how much I still want to believe in you." That broke something in him. He reached for her, gently, not touching, just close. "I never stopped thinking about you, Clara. Not once. Every choice I made, I told myself it was to protect you." "You didn't protect me," she whispered. "You erased me." Tears threatened at the corner of her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I know about Isadora," she added. "I know about the blackmail, about the photos, the threats." His jaw tensed. "She's trying to destroy everything." "She already has," Clara snapped. "Because even now, you're still hiding things from me." Leonardo's voice dropped. "I'm not hiding. I'm protecting what's left." "You don't get to decide that," she said. "Not anymore." For a moment, neither spoke. The lights of the city twinkled behind them, mocking the silence. Then, softly, Clara added, "Helena told me you still loved me." He stepped closer. "I do. And yet," she said bitterly, "I still don't know if that's the truth. Or just another part of your carefully built illusion." His voice cracked. "I'm not perfect, Clara. I never was. But everything, I've done the name, the empire, the walls I built them to survive, and now I'm trying to tear them down, one by one. For you." She stared at him, trembling between anger and longing. "I don't know if I can trust you," she whispered. "I don't expect you to," he said. "I only ask that you don't walk away before you see who I really am." She looked at him, truly looked past the suit, the empire, the name. And there, for just a second, she saw the boy from long ago, scared, honest, hers. But the second passed. "I need time," she said, her voice low. "I'll wait," he replied, "as long as it takes." She walked out without another word, the elevator closing between them like a chapter unfinished, and yet, somewhere inside both of them, the story still burned. Asterisk cracks beneath the surface for 3 days. Clara avoided every call from Leonardo. She kept her phone on silent, screened her messages, and buried herself in casework like it could somehow drown the ache inside her. But distraction was only temporary. Every quiet moment brought him back. His eyes, his voice, that terrible mix of guilt and sincerity. Her heart was a battlefield, and no argument could silence it. She hadn't told anyone, not even her closest friend, that the man she was falling for was the same boy who once vanished from her life. Like smoke, the shame was too much. Not because of him, but because she still cared, still hoped, still loved him. But she also remembered how it felt to be left behind, how it felt to search the streets for someone who'd never come home, how it felt to grieve someone who wasn't dead, just gone, and now he wanted her forgiveness, her trust, her heart, again. Meanwhile, in the shadows of polished boardrooms and marble corridors, Victor Martins moved like a virus, undetected but infecting everything. He had spent years studying his cousin, learning his patterns, watching him rise, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And now, with Clara caught between confusion and heartbreak, and with Isadora tightening her noose, the moment had come. Victor met with her in a rooftop bar, cloaked in golden light and false elegance. "He's cracking," Isadora said, sipping a martini. Clara confronted him. Victor smirked. "And she walked out. But she's torn. It won't take much more." Victor leaned back in his chair. "Then it's time we push harder." He slid a USB drive across the table. "Deliver this anonymously to Clara's firm. It contains every shady deal Leonardo ever buried, legal, gray zones, bribes, offshore accounts. Nothing illegal enough to indict him, but just enough to make her question everything all over again." Isadora's fingers closed around the drive. "You're ruthless. I'm precise. And what do you want in the end?" she asked, eyes narrowing. "Control," he answered plainly, "of the company, of the family legacy, of everything Leonardo thinks he's earned. And Clara?" Victor's smirk returned collateral. Back at home, Clara sat at her kitchen table, the old wooden box from her childhood open again. Her mother's letters lay scattered, their words faded but powerful. She picked one up. "You don't have to be strong all the time, mia figlia. Love is not weakness. It's the courage to risk being hurt again and again." Clara wiped away a tear. She couldn't keep pretending she was untouched by this, that she could just move on. Her whole life had been shaped by Leonardo's absence, and now, by his return. And maybe, by his truth. Her phone lit up. New message. From Helena Martins. "He's not perfect, but he's not his father. You know that, and deep down, so does he." That night, unable to sleep, Clara went to the only place that still felt real. Her mother's old house. It had been closed for years. Dusty, silent, but as she stepped inside, the memories came flooding in. The smell of jasmine, the sound of laughter, the ghost of a boy who used to hold her hand during summer storms. She sat on the floor of her childhood bedroom, knees pulled to her chest. And then, her phone rang. It was Leonardo. "This time," she answered. Neither spoke for a moment, just the sound of two broken people breathing into the silence. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for all of it." Clara's voice was soft. "I don't know how to move forward." "Then let me help you," he said. "Even if you never forgive me, I want to show you I've changed. You can't undo the past." "I know," he replied, "but maybe we can write a new ending." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You hurt me, Leo. You left a hole that nothing filled. I'll spend my life making it right," he whispered. "If you let me." A long pause. Then, with a shaky breath, she said, "I need time, but maybe. I don't want to hate you anymore." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. And sometimes, hope is born from the smallest cracks. Love on the edge of collapse. The next morning, Clara returned to the office with heavy eyes and a heart even heavier. She hadn't slept, not really. Just drifted in and out of thoughts too big to hold and too sharp to let go of. But one thing had become clear. This wasn't just about Leonardo. It was about everything she believed about truth, about trust, about herself, and the only way forward was through the fire. She stepped into her office only to find a sealed envelope resting on her desk. No label, no sender. Inside was a flash drive. Attached to it, a note written in block letters. "You still don't know the whole truth." Clara's hands trembled slightly as she inserted the USB into her laptop. A folder opened automatically. Dozens of files appeared: bank records, property transfers, internal memos, encrypted communications, all of it tied to Leonardo Villa. First glance, it looked damning. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, anonymous donations to shell companies, legal settlements with confidentiality clauses. It painted the picture of a man with something to hide. A lot, in fact. But Clara wasn't just a woman in love. She was a lawyer, and what she saw wasn't guilt. It was fear. All the documents had one thing in common. They began around the time Leonardo left home. The transactions weren't about building power, they were about building protection from something or someone. She opened the final file. A scanned letter, signed by a name she hadn't seen before, Rafael Torres. Leonardo's father's former associate. The letter warned of threats against Leonardo's mother, against Clara's family, against anyone connected to the old Martin's fortune. Clara's stomach turned. This wasn't just business. This was survival. As she sat back, reeling, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Meet me at Pier 17. Tonight? No lawyers. Come alone. She didn't need to guess who it was. Victor, and she would go. Not because she trusted him, but because she needed to understand who exactly was pulling the strings in this twisted story. That evening, wrapped in a long coat, Clara stepped onto the foggy pier where the wind from the river bit at her skin and the smell of rain clung to everything. Victor was already there, dressed in black, his smile unreadable. I didn't think you'd come, he said. I didn't think you'd still be pretending to help me, she replied. He laughed. You're sharper than you used to be, and you're more dangerous, she said. I saw the files. Victor raised an eyebrow. Then you know Leonardo's hands aren't clean. I also know why. His expression darkened slightly. He wasn't laundering money, Clara continued. He was protecting his mother, protecting me. From your side of the family, wasn't he? Victor chuckled, slowly clapping once. Very good. You figured it out? So this whole thing is the emails, the contracts, it was you. She was useful, he said. Desperate women always are. But yes, I fed her just enough truth to spin the perfect lie. Clara's fists clenched. Why? Why go this far? Because he doesn't deserve any of it, Victor snapped. The name, the company, the girl, it was all supposed to be mine. I played by the rules, I stayed and still. I was invisible. Clara took a step closer, her voice calm but firm. You weren't invisible, you were cruel. And Leonardo may have made mistakes, but at least he tried to protect people. Victor smirked, and look where it got him. He handed her another envelope. If you really want to destroy him, this is how you do it. Everything you need to ruin his reputation is in there. She stared at the envelope. Her hands didn't move. I'm not like you, she said. No, Victor replied. You're worse. Because you'll forgive him. Clara turned her back and walked away without another word. And for the first time in his life, Victor had no comeback. Later that night, back in her apartment, Clara opened the envelope not to use it, but to confirm what she already knew. She found letters, real ones, this time written by Leonardo to her mother. Hidden, unsent. All of them apologizing. All of them ending with the same words. I will never stop loving her, even if I don't deserve her. Clara's tears came quietly, and she knew. Tomorrow, she would face Leonardo again. Not for justice, not for revenge, but for the chance to choose love. The heart remembers what the mind fears. The morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of Leonardo's penthouse like a silent judgment. It touched every inch of the sleek furniture and cold glass as if daring warmth to live in such a calculated space. He stood by the window, sleepless, wearing the same shirt from the night before, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his tie discarded. On the floor, in his hands, he held an old letter, one of many. He had written them all for Clara, letters he never sent, words he never spoke, apologies that only lived in ink and silence. At the time, they felt like enough. Now they felt like dust. A soft chime echoed through the room. The elevator. He didn't move. The doors opened, and there she was, Clara. No lawyers, no briefcase, no armor. Just her. Leonardo turned slowly. His heart jumped, but he didn't let it show. He wasn't sure he had the right to hope anymore. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said quietly. She stepped inside, the door closing behind her like a final page being turned. I wasn't sure either, she admitted. A silence stretched between them, heavy but not angry, just full. With everything unsaid, she took a few steps forward. Pulling something from her coat, she placed it gently on his table. The envelope Victor gave her. He stared at it. You read it? He asked. I did. He looked up, preparing for the worst, and saw the same man I met as a child, she said softly, scared, cornered, but still trying to do the right thing. Leonardo exhaled, the tension in his body shifting but not disappearing. I never wanted to hide from you, he said. I just didn't know how to come back without bringing the past with me. You didn't bring it, she said. Followed you, he nodded slowly. And you? I don't forgive you, Clara said. The words landed like stone. But I want to. He looked up, startled. Because even with all the pain, she continued, I still believe there's the version of us that deserves to exist. A flicker of light broke through the storm in his chest. I told myself I was protecting you, he whispered, but maybe I was just protecting myself from being seen, from being loved, from being vulnerable. She walked to the window beside him. You said you built everything to survive, she said. I believe you, but surviving isn't living. Leonardo, he turned toward her, eyes wet but holding firm. And what about us? He asked. Is there a chance to start over? Clara smiled. Not fully, but enough. There's no starting over, but maybe they're starting forward. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to touch her hand, gently, carefully, like reaching for something sacred. She didn't pull away. I still don't know everything about you, she said. I'll tell you, he promised. Every truth, every scar. I'm not looking for perfection, she said. I'm looking for honesty. Then I'll give you nothing else. They stood in silence, holding the same space they once lost. And then she added quietly, there's something else. Leonardo braced. Victor, he's planning something bigger. I don't know what, but he's furious that I didn't side with him. Leonardo's expression shifted from emotional to protective. I'll handle him. Clara shook her head. No, we'll handle him. That word. He hadn't heard it in years, not from her lips. And suddenly, everything felt possible again. But fate wasn't done testing them. Back at Clara's office, a fire alarm had been triggered. Staff rushed out. In the chaos, a masked figure entered the archives. Within minutes, sensitive files or stolen legal evidence. Contracts, including copies of the original engagement agreement. Victor hadn't finished playing, but neither had they. Back in the penthouse, Leonardo held Clara's hand tighter. No more hiding, he said. No more running, she agreed. The past had broken them, but real love was finally giving them a way forward. Two against the storm. By the time they reached the law firm, the building was still in lockdown. Emergency lights flickered through the glass lobby, and security guards roamed like restless ghosts. Clara showed her badge to the front desk, and Leonardo walked beside her, no longer as a CEO, but as a man standing exactly where he should have been years ago. At her side, third-floor archives were hit, said one of the guards. Someone bypassed the access logs and wiped key case files. It looks like an inside job. Clara's heart dropped. She knew what they were after. The contract. The one that proved everything: her family's agreement with Helena, the promise made in good faith. The bond they once believed in. Gone. But Clara didn't panic, because now, she wasn't alone. Inside her office, she sat down and pulled out a separate folder from a locked drawer. I always kept a hard copy, she said, holding it up. Leonardo smiled slightly. Smart, no? She replied, wounded. Before he could speak, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. You chose the wrong side. Enjoy watching it burn. Victor. She showed him the message. He's getting desperate. Leonardo nodded, which means he's making mistakes. He opened his laptop and pulled up a mirrored drive he'd been quietly building over the past few months. I started backing up internal comms when I noticed some of the board acting strange. Victor was bribing senior partners to turn against me. He's already funneled money through dummy accounts to create chaos. Can we prove it? Clara asked. With your help, he said. Yes. They spent the next hours building a digital case, file documents, timestamps, encrypted audio from meetings, and testimony Leonardo had secretly gathered from his mother. Each click was a nail in Victor's coffin. And through it all, something changed. They didn't just sit across from each other anymore. They sat beside one another, and when Clara looked at him now, she no longer saw the boy who left. She saw the man who returned. As dusk fell, Helena arrived at the firm, graceful and collected, but with fire in her eyes. You're both doing the right thing, she said. But Victor won't go quietly. Let him fight, Clara said. We're ready. Helena placed a hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than even your mother imagined. That night, at a formal board meeting for Valela Tech, the room was packed with shareholders, executives, and media. Tension buzzed in the air. Victor stood confidently at the head of the long glass table, adjusting his tie like a man on the brink of a coup. He began with charm. Spoke of instability, emotional decisions, and necessary leadership changes. He presented graphs, doctored data, and falsified predictions to prove Leonardo's decline. The room murmured until Leonardo stood and calmly said, I'd like to respond. He gestured to the monitor. Clara walked in, laptop in hand, and connected to the projector. What followed was a meticulous, undeniable presentation: bank statements, audio clips of Victor discussing bribes, and the hacked message sent to Clara's phone. You think the Martins name gives you immunity? Leonardo said, voice steady. But today, it takes your mask off. Victor's face turned from smug to stunned. This is a setup, he barked. Then let's open an audit, Clara said, stepping forward. Full transparency. Let's find out together. Whispers turned to nods. Board members exchanged glances. Victor's support crumbled in minutes. The final blow came when Helena stood and said, I move to remove Victor Martins from any role, present or future, in this company. The motion passed. Unanimously. Security escorted Victor out of the building, shouting threats that echoed but didn't land. Isadora, watching from the sidelines, slipped away quietly, her leverage gone, her story burned by the truth. Outside the building, rain had started to fall soft and cleansing. Clara and Leonardo walked beneath it, no longer running from shadows. He looked at her, soaked and radiant. I kept thinking this was a fight for the company, he said, but it wasn't. Clara replied, it was for us. He stopped walking. She did too. And there, in the rain, he reached for her hand, not to take it, but to offer it. I don't need a contract to love you, he said, but if you'll have me, I'll sign anything. Clara laughed through the tears in her eyes. You already did, she whispered, when you came back. The quiet after the storm. The rain had stopped. Not long after, Victor was escorted out, and the chaos of the boardroom settled into silence. The city seemed to exhale with them. The clouds parted just enough for the moonlight to spill down over the rooftops, bathing the world in silver calm. Clara sat curled on the couch in Leonardo's penthouse. Her heels kicked off, hair damp from the rain, a blanket draped over her legs, a glass of wine resting untouched on the table beside her. She wasn't tired, just still for the first time in weeks. No one was threatening her, no contracts to review, no secrets lurking in the corners of her life. And yet, peace felt unfamiliar. Across the room, Leonardo stood at the piano. He didn't play it, had belonged to his mother, but tonight, he pressed a single key, then another, a slow, aimless melody that echoed through the walls like something half-remembered. Clara turned her head, watching him. "You didn't tell me you could play," she said softly. "I can't," he replied with a faint smile. "I just press the ones that sound like the way I feel." She let that sink in. "That's oddly beautiful," she said, "and exactly how I approach emotions." He walked over and sat beside her, careful not to break the fragile peace between them. "So what happens now?" he asked. She looked down, twirling a ring around her finger, ring from the past that now carried new meaning. "Now," she repeated, "now we figure out if we're brave enough to build something honest." "I want to," he said. "I know," she replied, "but wanting isn't the same as being ready." His eyes dropped. He understood. Clara reached for his hand. "I'm not saying no, I'm saying I want to build it slowly, brick by brick, not from pressure, not from fear, but because we choose each other, one day at a time." Leonardo nodded. "Then we start with day one." Outside, the first birds of dawn began to sing. They stayed up through the morning, talking not about the past, but about books they loved, food they hated, places they wanted to go. They laughed, really laughed. The kind that comes from exhaustion and relief. And for a few hours, they were just two people falling back in love without old names or legal contracts between them. But healing isn't a straight road. The next week, Clara found herself staring at the mirror longer than usual. Not because of doubt, but because of reflection. She thought about her mother, and what she would have said about all of this. How she would have smiled, but also warned her. "Love is not a reward," her mother used to say. "It's a responsibility." At the firm, Clara returned to her routine, but nothing felt quite the same. The team looked at her with new eyes, not because of what had happened, but because of how she had handled it. Grace under fire, strength with softness. Even her senior partner, once skeptical of her rise, now nodded with quiet respect as she walked past. But not everyone was at peace. Isadora had disappeared, gone silent. No lawsuits, no statements, no final moves. But Clara knew silence could be louder than threats. She kept her guard up, not out of fear but wisdom. As for Victor, his assets were frozen, and a formal investigation had begun. Justice, slow and cold, had finally started to move. Leonardo, meanwhile, took a step back from the spotlight. He delegated his CEO duties temporarily, opting to unlearn some of the walls he'd built around himself. He spent more time with Helena, with Clara, with himself, and every week, without fail, he sent her a letter, not texts, not emails, letters, handwritten, sometimes long, sometimes short, sometimes filled with questions, other times just memories. Clara kept them in a box, not because she needed proof of his feelings, but because it reminded her, people can change, even him, especially him. One night, he surprised her with a small dinner at her mother's old house, now carefully restored with help from Helena, candles, music, her mother's favorite dish. He handed her a letter. She didn't read it. She already knew what it said. "I still love you," she whispered. He smiled. "I never stopped. I never stopped." The proposal that was never about the ring. The night air was still, wrapped in jasmine and memory. Clara stood barefoot in the backyard of her mother's old house, toes sinking into the grass as she looked up at the stars. The silence here wasn't empty, it was full. Of laughter long gone. Of footsteps she used to chase. Of promises once broken, and slowly, carefully, rebuilt. Behind her, the soft sound of music drifted from the house. Inside, candles flickered on the dinner table. Her favorite wine sat half-finished. And Leonardo was waiting, not the powerful CEO, not the name behind the empire. Just him. The man who had finally come home to her. Clara breathed deeply, letting the air fill her lungs, letting herself feel all of it. She turned back inside, walking slowly toward the doorway. Leonardo was in the living room, standing by the old piano. This time, he didn't press any keys. He simply watched her, cross the room, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. "I thought you disappeared," he said gently, half smiling. "I didn't," she replied. "I just needed to feel it. This place, you, us." He nodded. She walked to him, close enough that she could smell the quiet scent of cedar on his shirt. "It doesn't scare me anymore," she said. "What? The idea of loving you?" His breath hitched. Clara continued. "I used to think that love had to be safe, predictable, like a well-written contract, everything spelled out, every clause understood. But I think I was wrong." "Clara," she held his hand, "maybe love isn't about guarantees," she whispered. "Maybe it's about choosing someone even when you can't control the ending." He cupped her cheek gently, his thumb brushing her skin like she might vanish. I choose you, he said. She smiled. Good, because I have something for you. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, weathered envelope. Inside was the original engagement contract, the one their mothers had signed, the one she had held on to, through fear, anger, and doubt. Leonardo looked at it, then at her. I don't need this anymore, she said, and she tore it slowly, carefully, into two, not out of spite, out of closure. He stared at the torn halves. I thought you hated it, he said. I did. Then I realized, it was never about the paper, it was about the promise behind it. She placed the pieces on the coffee table. If we're going to make new promises, she said, they'll be ours. Leonardo stepped back for a moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket. Clara blinked. Is that? He held up a ring, but it wasn't the one from the contract. It was new, simple, elegant. It's not about proving anything, he said. It's about asking you the right way, with no past attached. He got down on one knee. Clara covered her mouth, heart racing. I know we've been through fire, he said. But what we have now, it's not a second chance. It's a new one, from scratch. And I want to build it with you. Not because of what we were told to be, but because of what we've become. He looked up at her. Clara Almeida, will you marry me? She stood frozen for half a second, not from doubt, but from the sheer weight of the moment. Then, slowly, she knelt down in front of him. Only if we both promise. She whispered. Promise what? To never run again? He nodded. Deal? She kissed him, not with urgency, but with certainty. And there, on the floor of the house where her story had once started, she rewrote the ending, or maybe the beginning. Later that night, they sat side by side on the porch, wrapped in the same blanket, listening to the cicadas sing under the moonlight. No more secrets, no more ghosts, just two people who chose each other freely and fully. A wedding, written in their own words 3 weeks later. Sunlight bathed the vineyard estate just outside the city. Rows of lavender swayed in the breeze. Wooden chairs stood aligned under a canopy of white linen and eucalyptus, and a string quartet rehearsed in the background as final touches came together. It wasn't a grand headline-grabbing wedding. No helicopters, no society photographers, no board members or business elites. It was personal, intentional, and there's Clara. Stood in front of the mirror in the bridal suite, adjusting the delicate lace sleeve of her gown. Simple, elegant, nothing extravagant, but everything meaningful. Around her wrist, she wore her mother's bracelet. In her hand, she held a note, a letter from Leonardo. He had slipped it under her door that morning. No promises, no contracts, just one truth. I will walk beside you, even when we lose the map. Clara smiled, her eyes misty but steady. Helena entered the room quietly, dressed in a dark emerald gown that spoke of quiet power. She had been a constant presence over the past few weeks, not just helping with logistics, but helping Clara find peace with the past. Everything's ready, Helena said softly. Clara turned. Almost everything. She walked over and took Helena's hands. I need to ask you something. Helena nodded. Why didn't you ever tell me the full truth back then? About the contract, about the promise, about what happened with Leonardo. Helena looked down for a moment, then met her eyes again. Because I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid that telling you the truth too early would make you chase something you weren't ready for. Or worse, make you stop believing in your own path. Clara swallowed. But I was also wrong to stay silent. Helena continued. You had the right to choose your own love story, and I should have trusted you to do that. You didn't fail me, Clara said. You helped me survive. That's love too. They embraced, not as lawyer and matriarch, but as two women who had lived through enough to understand the weight of forgiveness. Meanwhile, outside under the arbor, Leonardo stood with his best friend and co-founder Davi, who straightened his tie with mock precision. You look like you're about to argue with the priest, Davi teased. Leonardo chuckled, eyes scanning the guests. There weren't many, just people who mattered. Never thought you'd get married in the middle of a vineyard. Davi added, I never thought I'd get her back, Leonardo said, half under his breath. The ceremony began as the sun dipped low, casting everything in golden light. Clara stepped onto the aisle, arm in arm with no one. She had chosen to walk alone, not because she had no one to lean on, but because she was walking toward her choice, on her own terms. Leonardo's breath caught when he saw her, not because she was stunning, she was, but because she looked at him with no hesitation. No doubt. The officiant spoke softly as the two stood hand in hand. Instead of traditional vows, they had written letters to each other. Clara's voice trembled, but her eyes stayed locked on his. You once disappeared, and I learned how to stand. You came back, and I learned how to forgive. You love like someone who's lost before, and I love like someone who's been found. Leonardo's voice was low, but steady. You taught me that strength isn't loud, that love doesn't demand, that the bravest thing I could do wasn't build an empire, it was let someone see me without it. There was no applause, just silence, and then a kiss. Soft, honest, final, but only in the way good endings always are, a beginning in disguise. Later that evening, during the reception under twinkling garden lights, Clara danced barefoot in the grass. spinning with laughter. As the music picked up, Helena watched from the side, a glass of wine in hand and a full heart beneath her calm smile. Leonardo approached Clara from behind, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Mrs. Villela," he whispered. She turned, raising an eyebrow. "Almeida Villela," she corrected. "Of course." He smiled. "I want a future where we get to rewrite the rules," she said. "Then let's never stop writing," he replied, and under that open sky, with the past finally quiet and the future wide open, they danced. A promise that time couldn't break. 3 years later. The world had changed faster, louder, more connected than ever. But some things remained untouched by time. The house where it all began, Clara's childhood home, had been fully restored, not as a monument to the past, but as a place where the future felt grounded. The garden bloomed year-round. The walls held warmth, not silence, and laughter echoed freely in every corner. Inside, a child's voice giggled. "Slow down, little tornado," Clara called from the kitchen, laughing as a tiny pair of feet dashed past. A boy just under 3 years old ran through the hallway, wooden airplane in hand, curls bouncing wildly. His name was Matteo. Their son, Leonardo, followed behind, slightly out of breath, holding a stuffed dinosaur in one hand and a juice box in the other. "He's faster than my best algorithms," he said. Defeated. Clara smiled as she wiped her hands and walked toward them. "And smarter than both of us put together," she added, scooping Matteo into her arms. The little boy giggled, wrapping his arms around her neck. "Fly, mommy." She spun once, slow and safe, and kissed his cheek. He squealed with joy. These were the moments they had once thought impossible. After the wedding, they had taken a step back from everything. Leonardo reduced his public appearances. Clara focused on mentorship and pro bono cases. They bought time, the way others bought land, intentionally, carefully, with no rush. They chose a slower life, and it changed them. Love, they learned, didn't grow louder with success. It grew quieter, more secure, more rooted. They had built something that no contract could define. That evening, after Matteo was asleep, Clara and Leonardo sat on the porch beneath soft garden lights. A glass of wine between them, a soft breeze brushing through the trees. "I forgot what silence sounded like," Clara said. "It's better when it's shared," he replied. She looked at him. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Not fighting sooner. Not telling me the truth when you had the chance?" Leonardo didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I used to, but not anymore. Because if I had done it all differently, we might not be here now." Clara nodded. She understood. They had stopped needing perfect. They had learned to be grateful. "For real, I'm thinking about writing a book," she said. He smiled. "A legal thriller?" "No," she said, laughing. "A love story." He raised a brow. "Anyone I know. It's about two people who were once promised to each other, separated by everything. Lies, distance, pride. But somehow they kept walking and found their way back." He leaned in, gently brushing her cheek with his thumb. "Do they get a happy ending?" "No," Clara said, smiling. "They get a true one." They sat there in silence for a while longer, letting the night settle around them like a blanket. And then Leonardo said, almost to himself, "It's strange. What is how the contract that once defined our lives means nothing now. And yet, we kept the one promise that mattered." Clara rested her head on his shoulder. "The one that wasn't written," she said. "To choose each other," he whispered. Again, and again. And again, the stars shimmered above them, and somewhere inside the house, a child dreamed, safe, loved, and surrounded by a love story older than he could understand. Not perfect, but eternal. Key end. If this story moved your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Every love story we tell here is a reminder. True love doesn't need to be easy. It just needs to be real.